Have you ever felt trapped in a cycle of toxic relationships, self sabotage, and persistent feelings of unworthiness? What if I told you that there's a deeper connection, a hidden thread trying to tie it all together? Join me as we peel back the layers of this unspoken truth. Prepare to be surprised as we uncover who daddyless daughters really are and how they shape our experiences and how they may be tapping into your own struggles. Are you ready to confront the past and transform your future? Are you ready? Hi, I'm Natalie, trauma mindset coach, and I'm here to help women break free from their self limited beliefs so they can unleash what's next. And part of unleashing what next is understanding why we go through the challenges that we go through. I just recently released my new book. It actually came out a couple of months ago, and it's called What About Me? Healing the Whole of the Soul of a Daddyless Daughter. I find that this subject is really not talked about a lot and probably has a lot to do with how we procrastinate, how we self sabotage, and how we continually connect to toxic relationships. And if you're someone that doesn't understand that dynamic, I just ask you to pause, put on your listening ear, grab a pen and paper and a comfortable seat, because I want to help you understand just a little bit about what may or may not be going on in your life, right? So join me for this transformative journey, and we're going to delve into themes and insights, and we're going to be talking about the topic of daddyless daughter over the next 4 weeks, beginning with today. I'm really excited about it. This journey really transformed my own life, and that's why I wrote the book about it, because years ago, I used to think like my first trauma was my history of domestic violence. And when I got on this journey over the years, I began to realize there was a large connection to my past and my past relationship with my father's inconsistency when I was growing up. So stay tuned. I have a lot to share with you. We're going to explore, how we heal past trauma, how we break free from toxic relationships, because the goal is for you to claim your self worth and empowerment. And it's an issue, really, again, not talked about. How many times have you heard that? How many times have you heard the term daddyless daughters? You don't hear that a great deal. We hear things again like domestic violence, sexual assault, but rarely do we talk about daddyless daughters. So, welcome to the first episode of our talk about daddyless daughters. We're going to embark on this journey together, and we're going to talk about, how do we break up and how do we begin to heal the hole in our soul? Because when I talk about this hole, this void, that void was created from somewhere. And if we can gain some understanding about where it may come from, we can realize and recognize why we keep feeling this void with a lot of self sabotage. How do we keep connecting this void to unhealthy behaviors? And how do we break free from that? How do we heal? As a daddyless daughter myself, I know firsthand the emptiness and longing that comes from growing up without the presence of a father figure. In my case, my father was inconsistent. I never knew when he was going to show up. When the wind blew, who knew? After a while, I've gotten used to not being with my father, not him being present in my life in the way that I wanted him to. Let's talk about what is a daddyless daughter. Let's begin there. You know, Being a daddyless daughter means you're feeling abandoned, unworthy, and incomplete. That void I was just talking about, it's a void that's manifest in many different areas, and which lead us down to the road of self-destruction and fulfillment. Again, I want you to pause here because I may be sharing some things with you for the very first time. Again, come with that open mind, of what a daddyless daughter may be and how it impacts your life, right? So I'm going to share my own personal stories. I really go into deeply about my relationships with my father, about each and every relationship that I had in my book. So if you're interested in that, after listening to this live or after joining me for this next month about Daddyless Daughters, you can purchase that book. I'm going to leave the link below in the description, right, when I upload this video to YouTube, right? So having said that, I'm going to share some personal stories today. I'm going to share you how my journey began and how I became a daddyless daughter. I was someone who was raised by both of my parents up until the age of 6 years old. And what I can remember most, which was so devastating in my life, is walking up to my parents' room at the time, and all I could hear was screaming, screaming as I got closer and closer to their bedroom. And when I walked inside, all I saw was my father holding my mother's head by the window and just blood running out of her mouth. And I apologize if this is triggering, but I want to keep it real and so you can get to know who I am and why I came up with this platform and why I decided to talk about Daddyless Daughters this month. Right. So when I got to the room, all I could hear my mother was saying is call 911, call 911. And keep in mind, I was 6 years old. So while she was telling me that, my hand was just shaking. And I couldn't even dial the numbers. I don't even remember what number I dialed because all I kept thinking, like, what in the world is going on? I've never seen my mother fight that I can recall my mother and my father fighting up until that day. So that was very traumatic for me. Right. So when my father looked up and saw me standing there shaking with his phone in my hand, he got up and walked out of the room to the front of our place and out the door and down the terrace. At that moment, I was really, really confused because on one hand, I wanted to make sure that my mother was okay, right? Because, here she is with a little bit of blood on the side of her mouth. I was wanted to know she's okay. But at the same time, like, where was my father going? Like, where was he going? And I remember at that time, because I grew up in New York City, we grew up in a high rise. And I remember walking out of the door onto the terrace. And when you go on the terrace, it was like, I don't know how to describe it, but you'll be able to see downstairs. And I stood by that gate, just waiting for my father to come out of the building. Excuse me. And I saw him come out of the building as I was looking down, and I was on the sixth floor, and I was watching him as he walked out of the building onto the street, crossed the street, through the parking lot until I couldn't see him anymore. That was the most devastating time of my life. Because at that moment, I didn't know whether my father was ever going to come back again. Where was he going? That was probably one of the first times I asked myself, what about me, Daddy? What about me? Are you going to come back? That's the only thing that was in my head, and it troubled me until my daddy did come back. Now, remember, I was 6 years old, so I don't know if this was he came back the next day, the next week. I don't remember the next month, but I do remember him coming back after that. And he sat down, myself, my sister, and my brothers on the couch and sharing with us about how him and my mother were breaking up. They were getting a divorce. Again, that was devastating because up until then, I kept wishing my father comes home. Daddy, are you going to come home? Where are you? I wanted my family back to where it was. But he told me, like, and us, that there was no going to be any family, that he was going to come see us. He did say he was going to come visit us, but I wanted my mother and my father back together, just like any other child would. But from there on, I couldn't wait because he would say that he would come visit us. So I couldn't wait. I was always waiting and excited, waiting for my father. And there's days that he showed up and I was excited to be around him, still in my mind, hoping and wishing that he would tell me that he was coming back home. Then there was days where we were dressed and ready, waiting for our father to pick us up, and he didn't show up. There was days that he came and days he didn't show up. So this had been the beginning of the inconsistency of my father's life in my life. I never knew when he was going to show up. So after a while, it was like, as I got older, it was like, whatever, whatever. I had resided to the fact that he was not going to be present in my life in the way that I wanted him to. And if he showed up, he did, he didn't, whatever. Later on, that would ever change into anger. I had a lot of anger for my father because, again, the question is, what about me? Not only did you leave my father, but you left me. You left your little girl. I was the youngest one in my family. You left your baby. What about me? Again, as I grew up and I started getting into relationships and I didn't understand why, and I'm gonna tell you why, and I'm gonna help connect that to me being a daddyless daughter, right? But I want to talk about who is a daddyless daughter. I want you to completely understand because if you look at that title, daddyless daughter, it kind of says the obvious to some people. It says somebody who grew up and didn't have a father. It's more than that. That's why I want to make sure in this segment that I give you a clear indication of what a daddyless daughter is. And you may be surprised. You know, when we talk about daddyless daughters, obviously we're talking about someone who has grown up with an absent and emotional unavailable father or a non-existent father figure in their life. So keep in mind what I said, a father who is absent, and then a father who is emotionally unavailable, which means that there could have been daughters, and there is daughters who grew up in a household with both parents. They will tell you, I'm not a daddyless daughter. I grew up with my father. However, if your father was not emotionally available to you, even though he was in the house, you still can be a daddyless daughter. And I'm going to talk about why that is because in a few minutes, I'm going to talk about what is the role of a father, what is the purpose of the father. So it didn't matter that if you had a father who had a job, who paid all the bills, who came home and gave his wife the check and say, pay all the bills. And then he got in his easy chair, laid back and said, don't bother me. I had a hard day at work. And mom was the one that took care of you. You just may be a daddyless daughter because we're brought into this world with two parents, mom and dad. They individually serve a purpose that we're going to get into. His purpose is more than just paying the bills. And I know sometimes we have a way of saying, well, he was a great provider. My dad was great. He paid all the bills. My mom didn't have to work. He held it down. He gave us everything we needed financially. We didn't want for anything. Really? Nothing? You didn't want from anything else but your father to pay the bills. If that was the expectation in your house growing up, again, you may be a daddyless daughter. You may be a daddyless daughter. So let's move on. You know, being a daddyless daughter goes way beyond, again, just the absence of your biological father, right? It encompasses an emotional void, like I mentioned, that emotional unavailability. Paying the bills doesn't equal he's pouring into you emotionally. Make sense? Paying the bills does not mean he's pouring into you emotionally. Paying the bills takes care of the finances. It doesn't take care of the emotions. Stay with me. Stay as we move on. When you have that void, when that emotional availability is not there for you to pour into you, it creates an absence. And it could stem from different reasons why that didn't happen. It could be because of a divorce that caused abandonment. Father just left. Father never even was there. Whether your father had his own struggles with mental illness, addiction. In my case, I later found out that my father couldn't even be there for himself. And that's because of his own addiction to alcohol and because of his own upbringing. It left an emotional scar on his life that wasn't healed. So how could he possibly be there for me emotionally if he couldn't show up for himself emotionally? Kind of making sense? But regardless of the reasons, and I can hear some women saying, regardless of the reasons, he was my dad and he was supposed to be there. And you're right. He was supposed to be there. But a lot of times when men aren't there or mothers aren't there, but we're talking about fathers in this case, The chances are was some issue that was going on, and it left us with emotional scars. It left us behind with unanswered questions. It left us behind with this need for love and validation that we did not get. You know, some women may not identify as daddyless daughters because they never met their fathers again. While others, and what was my case later on, we harbored deep seated anger and resentments towards our father. I know I did. I can remember, and I shared this in a video that I'm going to upload to YouTube. But I wanted to have this conversation in a talk show because I wanted people to have, if they had questions to ask me or had a comment to say it now while I'm here live. But it created anger in my life, and I share with people openly about my what trauma, uh, the trauma responses that happened in my life, and one of them was substance use addiction. That was one of the traumas that happened, and I used substances to mask my pain, my anxiety due to my trauma. I didn't know it at the time, but that's the reason why that I was using it. You know, but my father actually was the first one to tell me as I became a teenager, because I started using, I think at 16, 17, somewhere around then. He was the one that came to me and my mother later on and told me that, you know what, I could change my life because he saw my life, he saw the destruction of my life. And the reason why he knew it because he himself came into the world of recovery based on his own destruction of drinking alcohol excessively. So he was the first one to say, you know, you can change your life and how I didn't have to live this way anymore. My deep seated anger from my father didn't want to hear it. Whether it was good, bad, or indifference, just because it was coming from him, I didn't want to hear it. My anger was too deep. I had too much of resentment for him. That whatever he was trying to pour into me, I was dismissing. In my mind, and some of us say, excuse me, but you're not the one. This is me talking to Father. Father, you're not the one to tell me because you wasn't even there. So you don't get the right to tell me how I should live my life. Sounds familiar? That deep rooted anger. And we don't even want to hear it. At least I didn't. I don't want to hear anything from him. Anything. But I can tell you this, being real honest, when I learned to move past the anger underneath that all of that was this hurt little Natalie who wanted her father's love, who wanted to know, why did you leave me? What about me? I wanted to know. And I don't have a lot of time to share it in this live. But again, if you decide to purchase the book, I go in deep about how all that forgiveness happened and how I was able to one day actually go to my father and ask him, what about me? Why weren't you there for me? I understand that your mom had a divorce, but what about me? I got the chance to actually ask my father that. And I'm going to share with you probably in part 3 about what his response was and where our relationship went from there. Right? I'm so excited about that. Right? But again, at the time, I had deep rooted anger, just like many of you women don't want to hear from your father, don't care. Your mother did a wonderful job. We don't care. At least I didn't growing up. At least I didn't until I began the journey of healing. And I'm going to tell you why I began the journey of healing. And it definitely wasn't because I wanted to forgive my dad. I wanted a better relationship. That was not the deciding factor to begin the journey of healing. I'm going to share more about it in a little while. I'm going to tell you what it was. And after I share this, I'm quite sure you will identify with this. Maybe. I think you will. You know, so whether your father was physically present but emotionally distant, you are probably a daddyless daughter. Or like the case of my oldest daughter, where her father was definitely present for her, but he passed away before she really became into her adulthood. She's still a daddyless daughter, and it didn't matter how much he was available to her because her father and I both got on this journey of transforming our lives at the same time. We both began to do this journey of healing, so he was very available for my daughter, but he passed away, and I left a void. absent that she felt real deeply. That void that I'm talking about affects our self-esteem, affects our ability to form healthy relationships, and overall sense of our identity. And you may be having questions now, or you may be saying, I don't agree with that. Let me go further. Let's talk about the role that our fathers play in our lives. While mothers play an invaluable role in raising their daughters, they cannot replace the unique influence and impact that a father has. No matter what, it doesn't matter how much of a wonderful job. I often see, and I don't know if you've seen, but like on social media, on Father's Day, they have these memes or people have these cards they give to their mother and say, "Thank you for being my dad." That wasn't there. I get it. I get it. My mother stayed. My mother stayed to raise us. My mother did things that my father no way even can compare. She did more things than he could ever have done in my life, but she still wasn't my father. She still couldn't give me the influence and the emotional availability that I needed from a father. These are the things that I've learned over the years that fathers provide for their daughters. And it's a sense of security. They validate who we are and they guide us in a way that only a man can. I put on the post on social media, and the post said this, like, daughters need their father to be the model of how we're going to judge men in our lives. He is the role model. He is the role model on how men are supposed to treat us. And we're supposed to see that by his interaction with our mothers. They are supposed to demonstrate what a healthy relationship looks like. If you didn't get that experience, probably at a loss. Unless you were blessed enough to have like a step father that stood in, or some other um, male family member or whoever it was in your life to pour that into you. But even in that case, even if you had that, there's still a void when it comes to the area of your father. Because I'm quite sure you may be thinking like, stepdad was there, my uncle was there and they did a wonderful job pouring into me. But this question mark about where's my biological father? You often see children that were adopted, they always want to go back to where their parents are. They want that question answered. Why did you give me up for adoption? So there's always that question mark. Even though it is a blessing to have stepdad and have those other men in your life, it is a blessing because they can demonstrate and model what a man does for you, right? So having that sense of security, having that validation from dad, having that guidance on how to navigate the world, having that feeling like no matter what happens in the world, you know that you're safe because you know what that feels like. You know the experience of someone, a man, a father, providing you that safety. So even if the world becomes scarier, you know that there's a part of you has been given a sense of safety and what is that like, what it feels like. So when you encounter that in a relationship and it doesn't feel safe, you can say, this is not what I was told was a sense of safety in a relationship because dad provided that for me. Actually, your dad should be the first one dating you. He should be taking you out on a date when you're a little girl. He should be showing you this is what a man should be doing for you. This is how a man should be treating you. And no matter how much we tell each other, and I don't know if you're guilty of this, when I didn't have my father in my life, as I got older and started dating, guess who that like we were going to? Us girls were going to each other about what is a good man, what should we look for, what should he do. We went to our girlfriends, other women. And as great a support that may have been, it was coming from another woman. What I needed was a man to show me how I should be treated. But when you have an absent father who is not physically and or emotionally available to you, who's going to provide that roadmap? Who is going to share with you what to do, what to accept, what not to accept? Who's going to guide you along the way? Now, mom can give you perspective of a woman, but only a dad can give you the perspective of a dad. Again, he's the one that's going to model how a man should treat you. Now, if you are a daddyless daughter and you're viewing this, who is the one that showed you or modeled for you how a man is supposed to? Who was that? I know again in my own life, I didn't have it because my father was inconsistent. So what he did model for me is not security, it's not validating who I was. It was no one to guide me, to model or show me how a man is supposed to treat me. What he did model for me is that men are inconsistent. Men are unreliable. I can't count on a man. In my case, my father was a womanizer. That's what he modeled for me. These are the things he modeled for me. Guess what kind of man I kept inviting in my life? Ask yourself the question, what kind of man did you invite in your life as a result? Was it that man that had similarities to your father? Now, excuse me, even if your father, you have never met your father, he still showed you some things. What he showed you is that men just leave. Did that connect you to men that left or men that wasn't emotionally available? Was there similarities in your relationships? I know years ago and even now, what I teach my clients is to, and you can learn it in some of the workbooks that I have up for sale, or even again by purchasing my book, What About Me? Healing the Soul of a Daddyless Daughter. You can kind of start doing that. You can start journaling. You can start reviewing your past relationships in your time of self-reflection, and just write down all the things about that relationship and then write all the things about your father. Are there similarities? Now, I'm not talking about every single aspect of your father is going to be like every single aspect of your relationship, but some similarities, some similarities. So I'm hoping that gives you some kind of understanding of a role of a father. You know, he's that source of support. He's the one that gives you that sense of, I'm going to protect you. I'm here to protect you. I'm here to support you. He has a role to play in daughters developing a strong sense of self worth and confidence. A father also teaches us valuable lessons about relationships, about the boundaries we set in relationships and with other people, and resilience. Resilience is that bounce back. Those are some of the things that I didn't get. So when I connected to relationships that had similarities to my own father, again, emotionally unavailable, putting themselves first. When I saw those kinds of things, the aha moment happened. And this didn't happen till my adulthood. And then I said, that is the reason why I kept connecting to unhealthy relationships. That is the reason why when I was in a healthy relationship, it took me so long to leave. That's because it was my familiar. I grew up with the one man that was supposed to be there for me being inconsistent. So when I saw that in relationships with other men, it felt normal. Now let me tell you, I'm sitting in many lives and I'm always known to say it. Like we have a conscious mind and we have a subconscious mind. I want to make that clear. My conscious mind, what I'm aware of, was saying that I want a great relationship. I want a man who's emotionally available, has fun, enjoys life, knows how to love me, that I'm gonna love, and I'm gonna do all these things for him. I had it in my mind, but somehow my subconscious mind, the area that I'm not aware of, way in the back of my mind, that holds the belief about who I am based on what I was taught from the one man that should be there. He taught me that I wasn't valuable, I wasn't important. So that belief stayed in my head. So again, when I got in relationship with men who had those similarities, it was my familiar. Oh, I was used to that. It didn't signal in my head that I needed to leave. What it did for me is that just like I kept wanting my father to come back as a little girl, when I was in those kind of relationships, I always kept waiting for that man to come back with showing me love, show me that I meant something to him. I stayed around waiting when I should have left, but no one taught me that. You know, a father's role plays such a crucial model of healthy masculinity. It sets the example again how we should be treated with respect and dignity. Our father's presence helps shapes our expectations and relationships and influences our choices. Now, again, if you're someone who has been connected to unhealthy relationship, again, did your father pour into you what I just mentioned? Did he model for you healthy masculinity? Did he show you how women should be treated with respect and dignity? Did he set expectations for the relationships you were going to have in your future and the choices you made in the relationship? Did he do that for you? And again, if not, there's a high chance that you may be a daddyless daughter. Is that beginning to kind of open up a thought process that just maybe not having my father in my life at all or being inconsistent is a reason why that I may have connected to toxic relationships and why I had difficulty in leaving? Give me 1 second. I want to remove. I want to remove something. Give me 1 second, second. Here we go. Okay. All right. Is this making any sense? Is this resonating with you? All right. I want to now talk about the daddyless daughter syndrome and what that means. Right? The syndrome just simply means something that we're affected by. It's a common pattern that we have instilled in us. It's just my way of trying to explain that in layman terms. It's just a phenomenon. So this daddyless daughter syndrome is used to describe the emotional struggles faced by women like us who grew up without their fathers. Again, not being there for them emotionally or physically. It meant that we deal with feelings of abandonment, low self-esteem, difficulty in forming healthy relationships. In my book, I shared how I sabotaged a healthy relationship. Have you ever done that? My daughter's father, he was the one that was the most healthiest in my life because he was on this journey of healing his broken pieces. At the same time, I was healing my broken pieces. But because I did not heal my father wound, I looked at him, and when he asked me to marry him, I said no. I didn't believe that marriages were going to last forever. I didn't see that in my neighborhood. There are more single parent households raised by headed by women than two parent households. There were some two parent households, and even then, a lot of it was dysfunction. So I didn't believe. I didn't believe it was possible. Even though I was with them for a long time, I did not believe that we were going to last. Called the wedding off. I had a struggle forming and staying connected to a healthy relationship, and I needed to fix that. How was I going to do that? At that time, I'm going to share with you some of the things that I've heard on how to fix that. But I just want you to know, and the reason why I'm sharing all this is I want you to know that understanding and addressing challenges is crucial to finding emotional well-being in yourself. All of this, what I'm sharing, is really all about us, how we heal. But we're not going to heal until we kind of get an understanding about how absent fathers still have an impact on our life, how it creates a void. We have to understand that. Well, we don't have to, but it'll be great if you really want to do some healing within yourself for your emotional well-being, gaining some understanding about this connection to your struggles of self-sabotage and procrastination and unhealthy relationships, this may be the way. So I always tell people, just explore the possibility. You don't have to embrace it totally. Just explore the possibility. Because that feeling of emptiness that I know so well, left by our absent dad or our inconsistent dad, it runs deep. It's like a hole in our hearts that never gets filled. It makes us feel unloved, lost, and even in our mom, even if they were loving and caring, it does not fill the hole. Can I repeat that again? Even though your mother may be loving and caring and did all of that, she fills the hole on what a mother's supposed to do. She cannot fill that hole that was left by our fathers. She cannot. They serve two different roles, two different purposes. They're supposed to pour into their children from two different perspectives, you know, and without both of them, leaves us missing something, leaves that void. This feeling isn't just sad, it's like a form of pain that sticks with us. I can even remember the same pain that I felt when my father left that day. I used to feel that same pain when I broke up a relationship. And I want to add this to you. Every relationship that I had, I was the one that broke up with it. Even though I broke up with these relationships, in between the next one, I felt that pain. I felt that pain, that loss, that feeling of abandonment that I felt when my father left years ago, when he no longer lived in our household. I felt that pain. And what happens when we start feeling that pain, that's the thing that causes us to jump right into a relationship real quickly. So we don't have to experience pain. But pain sticks with us. It affects ourselves, how we see ourselves, how we relate to other people. So again, even if you had a great mom, like I did, I mean, she wasn't perfect. She impacted my life in some ways that caused me to feel unworthy. But for most part, she was there. She poured into some things to her children. But not having her dad around, it leaves us feeling broken inside. It leaves us feeling broken inside. So how do we heal from that? I want to share real briefly um, how I started off on this journey of healing. It wasn't because I wanted to have my father in my life and I wanted this relationship with him. It did not start off like that. When I started my journey of recovery, um, and there are a lot of, because I am also a a board certified addiction counselor as well, along with other specializations. But I can tell you, working in the field of addiction treatment, regardless of what your addiction is, whether it's drugs, alcohol, food, eating disorder, whatever it may be, because there's many forms of addiction beyond drugs and alcohol. Just somehow in society, it trains us when we hear the word addiction, we only think of drugs and alcohol. Addiction spans. It's just that the alcohol and drug addiction is not socially acceptable. The other ones are bad, but socially acceptable, those two are not acceptable. But what I've taught my clients over the years is that once you put down the drugs and alcohol, you have to deal with those underlying issues of what caused you to go down that path where you're abusing alcohol and drugs to the point that you are risking lives, that you were losing relationships, that you were losing jobs. But very few people that come into treatment and get on this journey of transformation actually do the work. Many people look for the easiest way out, and I get it because you're gonna have to deal with some painful experiences. You have to think. So what we do, we try to go on with life and try to figure out life the best we can without doing the hard work. And then what happens is we hit a brick wall. We sabotage opportunities for successes. We get involved in toxic relationships and don't know how to leave. We keep repeating this. We don't live fulfilled lives, not the lives that we want to live. Like, for example, I'll always show that my 32-year career as a counselor was wonderful. I did well. I got promotions, went from counselor to clinical supervisor to program coordinator to clinical director to co-founding my own recovery organization, actually starting out in the field, co-founding my own recovery organization. I did wonderful, but it wasn't my purpose. It wasn't based on what I was carrying around inside deeply for all these years, what I wanted to do. And that was to speak to women around the world, telling them that they can take their life back. Now, I didn't have the name of the organization back then, but I knew I wanted to help broken women because I was broken. I knew what it felt like, and I wanted to help other women. So I became a counselor, but again, it wasn't my dream. I'm at the point where, you know what? I'm doing what I always wanted to do. Not only online, but doing it offline, speaking around the world to women to say you could take your life back. And it doesn't matter where you start, it matters where you finish. And I want to help you connect those two dots. But we have to do some healing, we have to do some work. And again, a lot of it doesn't feel good. We don't have to live in the not feel good for long, but we have to visit for a while so we can go and rewrite the wrong message that we were sent about ourselves because of our father's absence. We have to change that feeling of unworthiness. We have to change that feeling that, you know what, we can go out and we can learn to take risks so we can live on different levels of our lives. We can do what's uncomfortable. We can do what's new. People who haven't been given that real sense of security, how it impacts their life, they stay in the same place of comfortability. I truly believe that we were created to go from level to level to level to level to level. And what I mean by level, I'm just talking about finances. I think that we're meant to do something here and we're supposed to do it on different levels. We're not supposed to stay at the same place. We're supposed to grow and we're supposed to share our gifts with the world. I truly believe that. But if you didn't get that sense of safety that the Father provides, it's hard for you to take risk. It's hard for you to get out of the uncomfortability. Because in order to change, in order to stretch, you're going to have to leave the world of comfortability and move into uncomfortability and stay there until it becomes comfortable. Again, if you don't know what that feels like, because you don't have that, you weren't given that sense of security growing up, you're probably somebody that's staying at the same place, not leaving, not growing, just accepting it is what it is. It doesn't have to be that way. You can break free from that. And that's what healing does for me. And that was the beginning of me saying, maybe I should begin to learn about this healing my father wound. Not because of my wanting to develop a relationship with him at that time. It's because I've learned if I did not heal my father wound, and you don't have to do it with your father. You don't have to meet him face to face. There's a way to do this. But if you don't heal your father's wound, that wound is still gonna have you connected to unhealthiness. You're gonna still keep inviting unhealthiness in your life. And I want to say this is also a form of unhealthiness. If you're a woman who says, I'm tired of toxic relationships, I'm done. I don't want another relationship ever again. That's based on you're not healing your father wound. Because what you're saying is, I don't feel safe enough to take the risk that the next man is going to be healthy. I don't feel safe enough because my father did not provide that sense of safety for me. So if you're like that, you feel uncomfortable when it comes to uncertainty. You feel uncomfortable when it comes to taking risks and you accept the status quo. I'm here to shake that up for you. I'm here to tell you you can move from A to B to C. There's things that, as a counselor I taught, but now that I'm a trauma mindset coach, there are things that I teach and can help you teach that how we go from being so afraid, and we're so afraid that we're not going to get into a relationship ever again. And what we do when we're saying that is that I'm going to protect myself. I'm going to create a wall around me so no one can ever hurt me again. not understanding that wall you are creating that's not allowing an unhealthy relationship to get in, that same wall is also keeping your Mr. Right out. And again, it all comes down to, and some people say, I don't care. What they're saying is they can't take the risk. Taking risks are too uncomfortable because they weren't provided that from daddy. They weren't provided what safety is, what it feels like. And that is the role of a father. But I'm gonna tell you, you can break free from that. And for me, what I learned when I learned that if I began to heal my father wound, that I could break the cycle of unhealthy relationship. Oh, I was in. Well, I wasn't really in. I was willing to open the door to the possibility of learning about this forgiveness, my father, what that meant. And it wasn't easy. It was painful. I had to confront some things. I even had to accept the fact that the relationship that I wanted as a little girl may never happen. It wasn't going to happen. That little girl inside of me who wanted her daddy was a little girl from years ago. It was a 6-year-old little girl. It was a 7-year-old girl. Here as an adult, this is at the time I probably was in my late 20s. I had done some work and I realized I'm never going to have that relationship with my father because now I'm an adult. It's too late to go back. And I had to grieve the fact that that wasn't going to happen. Those are some of the steps that I took in this journey. It was hard, but I kept pushing because all I kept saying to myself, if this is the path that's going to have me disconnect from my cycle, from my pattern of attracting unhealthy relationships, I was ready to do the work. And I'm glad I did. You know, so many things came out of there that was so positive, me doing the healing work. Is that there was this anger that was lifted. Little by little, I began to say, you know what? Even though I have a history of having unhealthy relationships in my life, this was years ago, I'm willing to take the risk that I might find Mr. Right. And what gave me the confidence, what gave me the self esteem to do that is on this healing journey, I began to not only heal my father wound, I began to pour into myself or being around other people who can help me with this process, who can support me in this, pouring into me the things that I didn't get from my father. And as a result, my self esteem began to grow. And I felt good about myself. And I began to say, like, if I run into Mr. Wrong and I can't, you know what I mean? When people show up on dates, their representative shows up. And that's why it's important for us to do the dating process. I didn't learn what that was. What is dating? Like if I got with a man and I met him, we kind of talked about being in a committed relationship. Not even talked about, we were just together too early. I didn't know what dating was. No one taught me what dating was. Dating time is the me to get to know you phase. It is not being committed to you. I want to check you out. I need a period of time for us to move past your representative so I can see if you're for me. And the same thing for the man. He needs to see me because I know, when I go on a date or I'm going to put my best foot forward. I'm going to try not to show you my flaws. So we need to move past that, both of us, in a healthy relationship so we can be around long enough to get a sense of your authentic self. Not everything, but get enough to say, okay, maybe I want to move forward. But if you weren't taught about dating, you don't know what that is. There wasn't a man to show you that. You kind of winged it like I did. I went into a relationship with no boundaries. I didn't even know what is boundaries. What is that? My father wasn't there to model that for me. I didn't know what that was. So I just went. I just went. I just did. I just show up. And I can tell you because I had this void in my heart, it left me with a void of feeling or wanting to be loved that I went into a relationship seeking to be loved. I want to stop and say this. Whether that relationship is healthy or not, it is not your partner's job to make you happy. He's an add on to the love you already have for yourself. And that's what needs to be cultivated during a time when you're not in a relationship. That's the time to do the healing. It is not too late. This is the time to be with you and heal your parts. So when it's time for you to go into another relationship, you're going with a different frame of mind. You're going into, you know what? And this is what I've learned like years ago. Even if I connect to an unhealthy relationship, if I see you come in, I'm out. And I shared on another video about those times that I ran into somebody who showed up and it looked good in the beginning, but shortly after, and I was like, I was out. I don't care how fine you are. I don't care what you can think you can do for me. We're not doing this. I've learned the signs. I saw the red flags. And I also learned that because in the beginning it was difficult. I had to learn not to jump out too quickly. Like, well, I seen one thing, I'm out. We have to be careful because we're human. We have flaws, we have errors, but we have to begin to assess, is this a flaw or error that I'm willing to get past? And I can tell you this, it's going to be hard for you to judge that yourself. It's important that you have support around you to help you through that process while you're learning how to be with a healthy man. How you learn, how during that time you're learning, how do I operate? How do I date? If you haven't learned this for and daddy wasn't there to show you, you don't have the information. So this is a great time to begin to learn those things. Right. And also, as you go on these dates, it's so important that you have somebody with you who has the right eye to assess and help you process whether this person is someone you should pursue further. And if you don't do that thing, I'm gonna tell you, your void. If you don't heal, that void inside of you is going to be doing the choosing. And you're going to accept like crumbs. You're going to accept any indication of love, even though it's a false sense of love. You're going to be there and you're going to remain and you're going to be in that relationship, hoping and wishing you can fix it. What can you do to make it better? You're going to come with all these lists to try to make it better. And the reality is, you can't make it better with the wrong man, with the wrong person. But when you think about your ideal person, what do you think about him? Like that list you may have in your mind, or actually a list like I have, like on that list, where does he hang out? Do you hang out where he hangs out? How are you going to get to be in front of him to meet that person on your list? If you don't have that of um, sense of being able to go outside of your comfort zone, chances are you won't meet him because he's not where you always are. He's over there. But are you comfortable in going there in the atmosphere that he may be hanging out? Or do you resign to the fact to stay in your circle and just complain about the men in that you see or men that you experience and say all men aren't good? That's because you're looking in the wrong places. I don't think he is gonna hang out where all your Mr. Wrongs were hanging out. So that was the thing that really helped propel me to begin this um, journey of healing. And like I said, many things came out of it. Another thing came out of it is that my father, before I say that, I got to ask my father again the questions about, what about me? What happened? Why weren't you there for me? And he said this to me: whether I was there or not, you are now an adult and it's on you to fix whatever you need to fix. Let me tell you something. When I heard that, I was angry. Like, how dare you? Because my expectations was you were supposed to say, I'm sorry. I should have been there. Something. I had this going on. I had that going on. I was like, wow. But again, remember, I identified my father was very arrogant. And they probably said it because it was hard for him to deal with the fact and get honest about, what, that he wasn't there. However, I took what he said and I just said, I'm not going to use that statement to become more angry than my father. I ran it by people that was in my circle, other women and men that were in my circle who are healthy. And they gave me feedback. And I came to the conclusion that, you know what? He wasn't able to say the words, but what he started doing is demonstrating that I was important in his behavior. We started socializing more often. We both had now had something in common. We both were in recovery. So I would go to meetings with him I would go to speak at his meetings. I would hang out with him, go to the dances with him, have different kinds of conversations with him. So we were able to develop a relationship, not the father and daughter relationship that I've always wanted, but a different relationship now. And we wound up developing a relationship that I'm glad I had. I learned so much by talking with my father. I would ask him questions about his childhood. I was asked questions about his mom and dad and how he grew up. And then after hearing all of that, I was like, okay, oh, we can see why. Okay, that kind of answers some questions, right? But I got to see another part of him. I got to see the sober him. Even though I didn't see him intoxicated a lot because he barely came over, there were moments that I did see him intoxicated. But this was sober dad. This was dad that was able to pour some things into me. My sister and I, we often say that the things my father would say, like one day, like writing a little, I don't know, a little book with all his little sayings, because some of the things that he said was so right on. And I received that part of my father. And as a result of that, I began to want different in my life when it came to men. I started wanting different. That time spent with him helped even heal my wound even more, because I began to understand that, the story that I carried in my head, that I was unlovable, that I was not worthy, was wrong. He wasn't available to be there for me in the way I wanted him to, because he hadn't done the work and the healing. So during this time, there was conversations coming up about forgiveness. In the beginning, it was like I didn't want to forgive him. This is prior to that conversation. I don't want to forgive him. He wasn't there. If anything, he should apologize to me for not being there. That was my attitude. But I kept hearing people around me, if you don't start the healing, you are going to keep connected to unhealthy relationships. And they helped me learn that when I forgive somebody, I'm really not letting you off the hook. I'm actually letting me off the hook. In my mind, I internalize, like, if I forgive you, daddy, that means I'm allowing you to get away with you not being there when I needed you. It wasn't about that. I took my eye off of that, and I kept my eye focused on that I was going to let me off the hook, because I was no longer going to carry around this anger that I had. I wasn't going to longer see men in the way that I saw them as unreliable, too afraid to take a risk. I was no longer going to do that. That is one of the beautiful benefits that I came out of healing my father wound and getting on this journey of forgiveness. Now, I want to say this. That doesn't mean that you have to forgive your dad. I'm just sharing about what worked for me. You don't doesn't say you have to go and say, Dad, you know what? I forget. You don't have to do that work. There's a way of doing this work without your father being present, whether your father's deceased. It's just a choice that I made at the time. And I got to do that, and I got to spend some time with my father in ways that I wasn't able to as a child. And so when he passed away, I was able to say, I have no regrets. I have no regrets. That I'm so happy that I did that. And not only did I do it for myself, I did it for my daughters. I wanted to set a precedent with them, that no matter what happens in their lives, no matter what happens with their father, like one of my daughters, I have two daughters, one of them, they have two different fathers. They're 12 years apart. Didn't expect to have a second daughter. Thank God I did, because she's such a joy. But um, I shared with her, because her father was not in her life, is not in her life. And I was able to, share some things with her, and she was able to, like, take her own journey of healing from that. And I'm so glad. And that's the work that I did. And the work that my mom did and my father did. They were the first ones to say it's okay to get help and let's mend some broken pieces. And they poured that into me. And I did the work in myself. And as a result, I poured it into my daughters. And not to say their lives are perfect, but when they go through challenges, they know there's healing. They know that there's cycles that can't be broken. They know that they can go for help from people who know better. They know that. So this is my way of saying that I'm not only healing from my life, but from my daughters and my daughters, because I want to help break generational trauma. I want to help in some way. My mom and dad set the path by getting themselves help and pass it on to us. And I'm so grateful for that. I'm so grateful for that. You know, now I want to pour it into you and help you break a curse, a generational curse in your life. Because the reason why I said that, if you look at their behavior, you're not the only one in your family that does that. You're not the only one in your family that had those experiences. You're not the only one in your family that had toxic relationship. You're not the only one in your family that has an addiction. You're not the only one in your family that you don't have addiction, but your boyfriend, your husband has an addiction. You're not the only one. That's been passed down generation after generation. It's time to break the cycle. You know, if anything, do it for yourself. You deserve happiness. So I just want to take this moment to say thank you for joining me, and I hope that you've learned some things, a lot of things. This is only part one of part four, a four-part series. Next week, join me. I'm going to talk more about how it impacts our lives. I'm talking about more because it impacts our lives more than just in our relationship, but that's one of the main ones. But it impacts other areas of our lives, and we're going to talk about that next week. So again, if you're interested in getting my book, I'm going to put a picture of the book after I upload this in the video. Go down to the link. I'm going to put the link there so you can purchase the book called What About Me? Healing the Whole of the Soul of a Daddyless Daughter. And my autobiography of my life from the beginning throughout my relationship is a tell all the traumas that I've been through, whether it was childhood sexual assault, um, addiction, uh, cycles of domestic violence relationship. Then it also talks about the healing. I'll put some little worksheets inside of the book to have you do some self-reflection and answer some questions for yourself. Then it also talks about the healing. And it talks about why I developed She's Taking a Life Back to pass this on to ladies like you. So I will see you next week. Take your life back. And don't forget to subscribe. Subscribe to our channel. We're building a community here. See you next week.